Hello and Happy New Year to all. I hope you enjoyed the festive break and you're all very welcome to our first Property Roundup show of 2024 here on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon. This show is sponsored by daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. So 2024 is already shaping up to be an interesting year for Ireland's property market, so it is only right to kick off the new year. We're joined by Pat Davitt, CEO of IPAV and advocate for the property market. Pat, thank you for joining us today. How are you feeling about the year ahead?
Carol, it's always a pleasure to join you, and I wish you a happy new year. And I'm delighted to be here with you to talk to you about the property market indeed, and also about what we want to speak about, the legal sellers pack as well. But yeah, the property market in 2023, I think you probably have heard me talking about this on many occasions. It has gone through some different difficult parts during the year where we thought the market was going to maybe change, and there was a little bit of wavering roundabout as to whether it was going to go up, stay still, or go back down again. And we've heard many commentators talking about the market going down. But in actual fact, I think come to the end of the year, I think with all of our barometer prices aren't out yet, but there will be in the next couple of weeks. But we're expecting that the prices are going to be up over 3%. And I think we've forecasted that as well. And if we continue the way we are at the moment, I think there's no doubt that property prices are going to be up again in 2024. There doesn't seem to be anything to stop an increase in property prices, and maybe not huge increases, but certainly in properties, I think out of the cities and the general cities, I think are going to increase. And many of those properties at the moment are behind where they were in 2006. And some people, even though it's not talked about very, very much, but some people are still in negative equity, and a negative equity maybe for 10, 15 or 20%. So that it's not sort of, all rosy in the garden, that everybody is out of negative equity at this particular stage. But I think in general, the market is going to move on. I think the prices in the cities might well possibly level off, or maybe even falter a little bit, I think. But definitely from out of the cities, I think prices you will see, I think, remarkably moving on. And I think that's even what's happening at the moment, as you could see, look across the country in different areas. I think you'll even see that as it is.
Well, just take a moment there to reflect on the regional and indeed the rural areas. Obviously, IPAV has the advantage of representing more than 1,600 estate agents all around the country. So you have that full perspective. How are your regional and rural estate agents? How are they feeling about the year ahead?
I think some people are very, very confident about it. I suppose there's a lot of different scenarios when you go out of Dublin and you talk to regional agents. Biggest thing with all agents, I think, at the moment is the amount of stock that's out there and new stock coming on the market. There's a difference, obviously, between second-hand prices and new prices. There's the amount of new houses being built throughout the country, and there's the whole question of who can buy these new housing at the prices that they're at, and who can get enough money to buy them is really sort of the big question. And I think it's going to be even bigger question in 2024. And hence, I think the whole macroprudential rules of the central bank, while they have come into play, and basically, I think because IPAV has kept pressure on them for years, they've changed their 3.5 times to 4 times. But I think that is going to change again. And I think it has to change again if we're going to continue to see house prices, new ones, as they are currently. But if you take a town like Navan or a town like Athlone, a good town in the Midlands like Athlone, and you see property prices there, like you see 3-bedroom apartments there, 2-bedroom apartments there, that were bought probably in 2005, maybe 2006 for over 300,000, and still only able to make 250,000 today. And that reflects right across, I'd say, the Midlands, and right down to the west, right down to the western, to the seaboard. And you see those type of properties, and then you see house prices rising by, in listening to Daft yesterday, in Limerick by 9%. But like, what you don't see is the reasons behind them. And I know that we saw a little bit about that last night and the reasons behind them, but you don't see the reasons behind why is somebody still in negative equity, even though we're talking about increases last year of probably 4%, increases the year before maybe a 6 or 7%, and maybe 8 or 9 the year before that. So why are people still in negative equity? So it is a big consideration. And I think as Corden, as people see that as well, purchasers see that, I think you'll see them buying properties in these areas, and that's what's making the property prices move on.
Yeah, I wonder though how the COVID effect really skewed figures regionally. So, for example, I was speaking to a developer in Mayo only in the last maybe 2 months, and he was talking about the increases that we're seeing in various towns around Mayo when people who were able to work remotely for the first time came back with their perhaps Dublin or Cork salaries, and that doesn't whether that capacity has been reached or not. Essentially, those prices aren't being achieved now in those same towns across rural Mayo. So I wonder how much of the post-COVID or COVID effect is going to be long-term for the regions.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the COVID effects, like, the increases because of the fact that people can work from home. I think we all felt that was going to be a short-term thing. I think even people who were selling the properties and people who were going to live in them felt that it was going to be short-term. I don't think anybody ever felt that it would be as long-term even as it is at the moment. And who's to say that it's not going to be much, much longer term? I know many employers are trying to get people back to their offices for so many days of the week, but I think that there's still going to be an element of working from home, no matter how we look at it. It's incredible to think that prior to COVID, we didn't really think an awful lot of working from home, even though some people were doing it, but we didn't think about an awful lot of it from a national perspective. And it's incredible when you think, like, you have governments and you have all these think tanks about all this, doing all this, looking into all these different situations, and still something there that is looking at us now working from home. It's such a fantastic idea, but the secret to it all is broadband. And we've been talking about broadband for years and years. And I know many agents talk about, and government bodies talk about BERs and BERs, the increases involved in BERs. But you can have all the BERs you like, but if you don't have broadband, the advantage that you're going to have in your property price is going to be very limited, where broadband is the secret and the key to what's going on.
Yeah, and look, not just for those remote working, we need it now for everyday life. And actually talking about technology, and I suppose, I talk a lot about prop tech on the show, the technology that can improve the buying process, but there are still some things that technology has not been able to address. And that's one of the reasons why I really want to talk to you today about the new seller's legal pack. Again, it's hard to believe coming into 2024, as somebody who came into this industry through conveyancing almost quarter of a century ago, I can't believe how little progress has been made in the conveyancing side. So before we get on to, I suppose, the seller's legal pack, let's talk about the results of IPAV's conveyancing survey in 2023. First of all, how did this survey come about?
Well, we started these surveys in 2015. I came to IPAV as the CEO in 2013. And conveyancing always had been a problem from my point of view because I came from a state agency background. And all of the conveyancing and the times for conveyancing, even prior to 2000 and probably 18, 19, 20, and when COVID came, we were sort of in a situation where I suppose most people could really feel that their conveyancing times were going to be somewhere between probably 4 and 8 weeks. And a lot of the ones then that were longer than that, there was some reason behind it or some problem behind it. So conveyancing times were, like in 2015, there were something like in the region of the average conveyancing time was somewhere in the region of probably 12 to 15 weeks or something. It has got no better since. So we started doing surveys in 2015. And actually at that time, we wrote to the minister, I think it was, Minister Stanley, I think it was in at that time was the minister that was involved with this and who had responsibility for it. And we asked them to meet them to discuss this conveyancing as to what was going to happen in the future with it. And indeed, all sorts of things happened then. We met at the Law Society and they had a conveyancing committee, and they talked about that this was going to change. There was going to be conveyancing in the next 3 or 4 years or something like that. And anyway, we didn't get to that situation, and we still haven't got anywhere near e-conveyancing. I know some people think that, yes, it's only around the corner, but it's not around the corner when you look at the conveyancing, the details required for conveyancing at the moment, and why the timeframes are there for it's taken so long to close the sales, etc., etc. So we did that that time. that survey. We did it again, I think, in about 2019 or 20, and now we've done it again in 2023. And much things haven't changed since we did the first one to where we are today. Like the conveyancing times are still somewhere in the region of 4 months from the time a property is put in the market to an actual fact when you sign a contract, and that mightn't even be, it might be a contract subject to X, Y, or Z. So that time frame is still there and very much there, and it's causing a lot of confusion. It's causing a lot of hassle, and it's causing a lot of, I suppose, for people who are buying properties, it's causing a lot of heartache and heartbreak for them, because they never know when you have a property bought until you have a contract signed, and it's signed by both parties. So like, to get you to that stage is really what we are trying to do in IPAV. Now with this legal sellers pack, we're trying to get into a situation where the documentation is all got up front for a sale. So this is done at the moment in all of the sales that are going for public auctions. So for years and years and years, many years before ever I came into the property market, if you go to sell a property by public auction, you must get all of the documentation in line, because on the day that you have the auction, you want to be able to sell the property. Solicitors must have had looks at the legal documentation, everything up before then, and everybody must be happy that they're going to buy the property if you sell it on the day. And we're trying to do the same with private treaty sales. It's no big sort of deal that we're trying to do. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to do anything other than trying to bring everything into line with what's done with public auctions. And that's, if we're able to do that, I think you're able to do many things if you're able to do that, because some properties that are for sale, the conveyancing could go on for a year with them, or maybe longer, because planning isn't correct. Maybe rights of way aren't correct. Maybe different things with the property. There may well be bits of extensions and different things put with the property, septic tanks outside the boundaries, like all sorts of things that you come up with. There's, when a property is put on sale in the beginning, that maybe the owner themselves feels that their septic tank is inside a boundary. It's only when it's mapped at a later date that they find it's not. And that causes all sorts of hassles. You know, you have to go back for planning permission, you have to do this, you have to do that. So the legal sellers pack will mean that those type of properties won't be going on the market now. Those type of properties will be checked immediately when a vendor wants to sell their property. They have to get their legal sellers pack. They have to get it in order. The solicitor will be instructed to bring up that legal sellers pack for them, to bring the documentation with it. There's a certain amount of legal documents. Some people think there might be more, some people think there could be less. Whichever is going to come out at the end of the day when the bill actually comes into force will be, obviously, it'll be decided as time goes on. But it means that the documentation that's got for it, the legal documentation, means the property at least can be sold. So we know that properties that will be on the market can be sold, which is a big thing to start with. Yeah, and we know that...
It makes absolute sense. And I suppose for anybody who hasn't read the IPAV conveyancing survey results, I think it's really important to point out that, I mean, the stats are staggering. 88% of auctioneers have experienced or experience conveyancing delays, and 97% say they've been frustrated by the conveyancing process. Like, yeah, they're huge figures. And okay, they're the agent. So you might think, okay, well, that's impacting their livelihood. But actually then, in a poll of, I suppose, the more general population, am I correct in thinking it was 73% said conveyancing caused a problem when purchasing a home? So they're not the industry, they're the consumers, they're the people who are experiencing this. Is it all down to documentation?
And that actually survey that you're speaking about was done by Ireland Thinks, and it's an outside company that IPAV got to do this survey for them. Not our own survey. We did our own survey, first of all, through our own members. But this particular survey is done with consumers, which is a different kettle of fish, because this bit of legislation is really consumer legislation. While it's going to help, but it really is about consumers. So yeah, it's about documentation. I suppose in many cases, in many areas, there are different things, because an agent finds themselves that I'm selling your property today and you call me out to your house and I go out and you give me the sale of your property, and I'm dealing with you and we're selling your property, and I probably ask you, is this correct? Or you have an extension in the back of your house? Did you get planning first? Yeah, I did. Yeah. And everything, and all this sort of thing, you know, this sort of conversation goes on between agents and vendors, and the agent will advise you to go to your solicitor and get your deeds, etc. Where are they, and where's all this type of stuff, you know. So some vendors will go to their solicitors immediately, and they'll get these documentations drawn up. Some may not even have a solicitor. Some say, well, I have a couple of solicitors. I don't know who I'm going to go to. I don't know where my deeds are. But look, I'll talk to the family, or I'll talk to my wife, or I'll talk to my husband, and I'll see where they are, and I'll see what the story is, and I'll see what solicitor we're going to use. And yeah, we'll do that, of course. It's all a great idea on the day, but like a lot of it doesn't happen. So then, like eventually, you know, when I sell your house for you, then we find that we instruct the solicitor, if you have picked a solicitor at that stage, or whenever you do decide to pick a solicitor, and then we start looking about this, all these documentation. But from day one, I'm sort of dealing with you. But the minute then I start then on your behalf instructing your solicitor, I'm dealing with your solicitor and I'm dealing with you. And when I have a purchaser to buy the property, I'm dealing with the purchaser, and then I'm dealing with the purchaser's solicitor. So somebody is gone from being in a situation where dealing with one person to dealing with four parties to try and get the legal part of the whole process moved on to get a contract issued and to get a contract signed. So, like, again, that whole process of having to keep looking about contracts and having to keep doing all of this sort of thing, you know, when the legal seller's pack is in place, that will all be gone out the window, because the legal seller's pack will be put together. It'll be put up on the data room of the solicitor if they have such a thing, or if they don't, well, then well and good, it'll be in paper format. But if it's in the legal, if it's in their data room, the solicitor for the purchaser can look at all that information. They can see what's there. If there's something missing, they can go back to the solicitor, but maybe at that particular stage, they're selling the property as with the legal documentations that they have. So then, obviously, at that stage, somebody can decide, is that information good enough for me? Is it not good enough for me, or whatever else is or isn't? And before such time as somebody can even put an offer on the property, they've had a look at the documentation to see that everything is in order. And then when they do put an offer on the property and the property is sold, contracts already is part of the legal seller's pack. So the contract can be signed by the solicitors, and a closing date in the normal term from public auction sale, when a contract is signed, it's somewhere in the region of 4 weeks. So again, so a 4, 6, even 8 week close would then be the time. And I think from everybody's point of view, it moves conveyancing a step further, closer to e-conveyancing. And I think a helpful step, I think, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and look, that makes absolute sense. On I suppose, just asking the question then, we have such low, chronically low stock levels of secondhand homes coming to the market through private treaty. Is it possible that this could actually slow properties coming to the market, or could it actually further decrease the number of secondhand homes available?
Well, I think secondhand homes being available and secondhand homes that you can convey are going to be slightly different. So I think that there's going to be a time frame there. If we take it that the time frame at the moment, as we see it, getting the documentation after a property is sold, is somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 weeks. If we take it that would be the norm prior to a property going on the market to get the documentation together, that time is something that agents and solicitors are going to have to blend into the process as time goes along, so that a vendor that's going to sell their property, the first thing they'll have to do is get their legal seller's pack in order, so that time is going to have to be given, I suppose, first of all, and agents are going to have to become aware of that. They're going to have to blend it into the process. Will it mean that there'll be less properties coming on the market? It possibly will, because the properties that will be coming on the market are properties that can be sold. You won't have somebody deciding to put their property in the market if they've no intention of selling it. And then all the hassle that causes to a purchaser, offering on properties and going to get surveyors reports maybe and different things in the property. So it's going to cut that out. And I think that's a very important part from properties going on the market. So I don't think it's going to, in actual fact, change the amount of properties that's going to come on the market, but it's going to change the quality of the property that's going to come on the market. And I think that's a big thing from a consumer's point of view, because consumers are obviously, purchasers are buying properties. And in this particular case, I suppose we're all consumers. The vendor is a consumer as well. But from a purchaser's point of view, a purchaser is in good faith putting an offer on the property. A vendor in good faith is taking the offer and hoping to sell the property. But none of them can sell it unless they have the legal documentation to sell it. So isn't it important to have the legal documentation first and then know that you can sell the property? It's sort of putting the cart before the horse, or putting the horse before the cart, whichever way you want to look at it. So,
Pat, it absolutely makes sense when you say it. So that begs the question, why was this legislation needed? Doesn't everybody in the transaction benefit from a speedier process?
Well, you'd imagine that everybody benefits from it. It baffles me why the government haven't brought this piece of legislation in before. Why they haven't seen that these delays are there, and why haven't they done something about it? Deputy Mark McSharry brought this legislation through for IPAV. We've written the bill ourselves, and he has brought it through. I'm not saying that the bill is the final document that's going to be accepted at the end of the day, but we're not obviously legal people, so we're not the government, so we're not the people who is making the laws. So we have put the bill together ourselves. We've brought it through. There's been no opposition to the bill in the second reading in the Dáil. The first reading is only a matter of reading it into the records. The second one is where there's discussion on it, and if people want they don't want to support the bill or whatever the case, they can come into the Dáil and they can talk about it. We've talked to the political parties about this. We've had no opposition from any of the political parties about it, that they bothered coming to the Dáil to talk about it, other than Sinn Féin were there that evening and they talked positively about it, which we were happy about. None of the government parties they disagreed with the bill, so it went unopposed to the committee stage, which is the next stage, and now different parties will be brought in to discuss about the bill, to see if there's amendments they want to make to it, etc. But why wouldn't everybody want this? I don't know. I know the solicitors have tried to put, they have done actually put a PCIT, what they call PCIT, pre-contract investigation of title, together, only for their own members, and it has probably worked to a certain degree. I don't know if it has helped to bring down the timelines. It doesn't seem it has from our survey, but I don't want to. I'm not saying it hasn't been any good. It has been, certainly. This is the next step after the PCIT, I believe. And it's unfortunate or fortunate, depending which way you look at it, that we have to go to law with this, because it has to be, we have to make it law before such time as people will do it. So, we can't just depend on people and say, well, look, we have to get a seller's legal pack, because there will be agents that will put the property in the market. I'm going to speak about agents first. There'll be agents that will put the property in the market without the legal seller's pack, unless it's law. There will probably be solicitors and different people who will act for people without it. So, we need to have it in law, and we probably need to have this in the event of e-conveyancing as well. So it's going to be a big step for e-conveyancing as well when this happens. So I think it's going to be a further step along the way that's going to make this happen. And when the Minister for Justice at the moment, Minister McDay, Helen has obviously brought up, she has looked for submissions on conveyancers as a profession. And if that was to be brought into force, well, then I think all hand in hand with this legislation, with that legislation that she's speaking about, and with e-conveyancing, I think property sales would become into the probably 21st or 22nd century, which is really where we want to have them. We want the property sales to conclude as quick as possible, because as long as a property is undecided, while somebody might have it bought, gazumping can take place. Somebody can put a further offer on a property. And it's very, very embarrassing for agents. I know many people blame the agents for this, but at the end of the day, it's very embarrassing if I have to go back to somebody and say to them, look, somebody else put an offer on this property. And they say, oh, I thought I had the property bought. Well, you have a sale agreed, but you don't have it bought. And as long as it's out there and it's only sale agreed, I have to pass on the offers to the vendors. And if they accept them, they accept them. And if they don't, they don't. Not that agents are going out looking for these offers, but sometimes this happens. So gazumping happens. And if the property price are going down, gazundering will happen, which again, people will run down the price of properties. And these things happen. And the longer there's uncertainty between the time a property is sale agreed and a contract is signed, the bigger danger there is of these things happening. So it has to be in everybody's interest, Carol, to get the sales closing quicker and to get contracts and everything out there so as people can see them.
Yeah, no, look, absolutely, and I fully agree with that. In fact, a couple of years ago, we did some research in house. From speaking to estate agents, we were trying to figure out at that time the fall through rate, but we were also tracking when the property had sale agreed. So actually, what we could see, there was a direct correlation with how long something takes to close, how long the transaction takes to close, to the likelihood of it falling through. And I think you touched on something very important there, and that is that inexperienced buyers, they believe once they've paid their booking deposit that they have a legal right, and that's just not the case under Irish law. And by the way, that has never made sense to me as somebody who, again, started conveyancing a quarter of a century ago. It's still that particular booking deposit system still remains in place in Ireland is just complete madness to me. So I understand why inexperienced buyers believe that when they've paid their booking deposit, they should have some legal right, but that's just not the case. But in any event, we absolutely welcome and support this as a very positive and very necessary, and in some ways long overdue step forward. But I just want to very, very quickly run through maybe the instances where the seller's legal pack is not required. So, for example, I know from reading the documentation that you prepared there that, if it's an off-market transaction or an off-market sale, then it's not required. If there's any element of commercial, this pack will not be required. But it's also not required for seasonal and holiday accommodation. So what's the rationale behind that?
In a lot of holiday homes, like there are legally holiday homes, there's a lot of other legal situations behind them, like companies and different things set up to buy these homes and everything. And I suppose rather than getting into all of this as to who owns the property and where the property is owned or what company owns it and how much times of the year is this property, does somebody themselves or some of their relatives, etc., live in this property? Because you can only live in it for so many times, months or weeks of the year as well. It has to be rented out all of the other times. So to get I suppose, away from the extra problems that this would cause and the explanations that this would have before such time as you put a property in the market, we left this out of the bill. But that doesn't mean to say that, if the government comes back and says, oh, listen, we want to put this into the bill, well, then fine. We're not precious about what's in the bill. We're not precious about having this bill ourselves. We're quite happy for other people to help us to get this bill across the lines, to make sure that it works and to make sure that it comes into law. But like what we are precious about is we want to see it happening, because we have estate agents throughout the country who are taking deposits on properties. And exactly as you say, if somebody purchases a property and they feel that when the agent tells them we have a deal there and the vendor is happy to deal with you, that they think that should be the end of it. And if we looked at it realistically, we would obviously probably all think that the very same thing. It's not just because people are inexperienced, but because that is the situation. And we find then that as time goes along, that the thing could change, that you could actually have bought the property and now somebody else is buying the property, or you can't buy the property because there's no planning, or you can't buy the property because there's a right of way, or you can't buy the property because there's an extension on the property, etc. So a lot of people don't understand that, and they wonder to themselves, well, why did the agent put the property in the market in the first place? And the agent may well have asked the vendor, is there planning for your septic tank, or is the septic tank inside your boundary, or is the percolation area inside your boundary, or etc., with it? And vendors, many of them think themselves that it probably is, and then they find that it's not. So, it's not really the agent's responsibility to put this. It's their agent property to sell the property, but it's not their responsibility to look at the legal part of it. And the legal part of it is the most important part when we get to the end of the day. Like, selling the property is a cog on the wheel. The legal part is another cog on the wheel. The mortgage part is another cog on the wheel. So we've all these cogs along the way, but we need to tie them into one another to make sure that people, when they do buy a property, that it actually is, first of all, that it's saleable, and secondly, that when they buy it, that the shortest time possible arrive at between the time that they sale agree the property and they get to sign for it and get to move into the property as well. Like, you have people who, it's not, you have somebody who sells a property themselves and wants to buy another property. So you're trying to tie up your day with selling your own and concluding your own sale with a new property. And like, for people themselves, purchasers, the amount of hassle and heartbreak that brings to many, many couples is incredible. So this consumer legislation, as I believe it is, I think is going to help that whole situation. And it's going to help people who really are finding that maybe when they sold their own property, they sold it in good faith, but then they can't buy a new one, and they have to now say that I can't sell my own property, and all the human torture that this brings along the way with it. I think is this bill is going to help it, I think.
Pat, that's a really good note to finish on. I'm really glad that you brought that in, because so sometimes I can forget when we talk about the process that actually we are dealing with people and their families and their dogs and their luggage and their belongings and their furniture. And if they're selling a home and waiting to move into their home, and we don't do chains well in this country at all. I would say that for sure. So it is important to understand that actually when we talk about delays in terms of weeks, that actually we are dealing with a very human consequence of that as well. So look, thank you for taking us through the information today. I know you've mentioned that the bill is at committee stage. Are IPAV members recommending to their sellers that even before this is a legislative requirement, are they recommending this as best practice between now and the time of this coming into law?
We're recommending as best practice. Our members are recommending as best practice all of the time. Our IPAV are recommended to our members to recommend it all of the time. In actual fact, we have a document on this that we put together back as far as 2015, where we sent out to members. We have another member who actually wrote a small book on this in Donegal, and we send that to members as well, on and off. We've had it in our newsletter, and agents would be aware of it. But like in the best will in the world, like with an agent advising somebody to go to a solicitor and get their documentation up in order, if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it, and they won't do it until some people see that it's not important to contact my solicitor until I have the blooming property sold. Don't be annoying me about it at the moment. And here we are. So like it's fine in saying, and it'd be, and if every vendor went to their solicitor and got their legal documents together, I think we wouldn't need this bill at all. But because of the fact that that's not happening, we do need the bill. And I think the solicitors need it, the auctioneers need it, and I think the purchasers and vendors very, very much need it. So I think it's a practical bill. And if it's not opposed by government, there's something obviously good about it, because if they found something wrong with it, they would obviously oppose it, and the opposition would as well. So we'll all have to work together maybe to make the bill that bit better, because I'm sure it's not, there's many things in it that maybe people could change. We're happy to change them if it's going to be necessary as well. So I think if we can all work together to do it, we can get this into legislation by the end of the year. It's hopefully in February we'll go to committee stage, and if we can work on from there, well then hopefully it will happen. I know that the government are putting together the stakeholders group at the moment. I thought it was actually going to be run by the Department of Housing, but apparently it's going to be run by the Department of Justice, and they're going to look at this type of an idea and other things as well, the stopping sales in the property market. Like conveyancing isn't the only one. So I think when that happens, and I think that they come up with different maybe changes or amendments to this actual bill, that we'll get to move on with it, and hopefully we will get it into law sooner than later.
Well, it'd be wonderful if that was something that we could expect for 2024. Again, it's something just for the betterment of all parties in the property transaction. So that would be great. Thank you so much to Pat Davitt, CEO of IPAV, for taking us through that today and being our very first guest of 2024. My thanks to producer Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media. And huge thanks to our show sponsor, Daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows on iPropertyRadio.